Good morning and welcome back to the Explosive Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everyone. Good morning.
And a good morning to you, Mike. How are you?
Doing well. Interested
Happy
about our
New Year.
topic today. It should be good to go. Neat conversation for today. Any other kind of announcements, things going on? All right. Well, I'll just keep talking if you guys don't want to say anything. So when I stop, you guys can say something.
Let's go to
That's
what
like-
we just talked about, Seth. And in between our offline and online, do you think how much data do you think is in the bus tracks or for the bus routes? Your guy apparently is on the dot every minute they're on. If it's 6:37, they're showing up at 6:37. Do you think they record to track this? And how important is that?
That would be interesting. If I were a bus company, I would want to have something tracking where the buses are. Do they do that? I don't know. But yes, our normal female bus driver is spot on, man. Like,
they are traveling. They are traveling with the world's most valuable cargo.
Indeed.
Our future is basically on those buses.
I was like, I don't think buses are that expensive, but
the bus is not expensive, but the cargo that they carry is extremely expensive.
This is very true. So you think there would be a lot of statistics there? Because my bus driver was very late today. No problem. They've been great, but we were a little late today.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't had I do know that there's been instances where there are cameras definitely installed on buses now. And so if people misbehave, they can be retroactively looked at and figure out what's going on the bus. So there is some tech on there. Whether or not those camera add-on things actually contain like a GPS that pings something or tracks stuff, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it would be very lightweight to be able to have a tracker like that. Is someone actually analyzing the data and doing anything of value with it? No. I mean, if anything, it's just they're capturing it. It's one of these.
Yeah.
Someone's not really.
And then you have to think about like how accurate is that GPS? You know, because
are they buying
a little bit here because this kind of brings me a different thought, right? Where if the GPS in these vehicles is so accurate, then it shouldn't take me like 3 to 4 times to call FedEx and tell them that they're delivering packages across the way, not even on the right street, but somehow they think they're delivering to the right address to the same house. That's not my address. It's not on the same street, but it's nearby me.
If my free application will always get me where I need to be. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point.
Which begs the question. Do delivery drivers, I'd love to see this in the comments, do delivery drivers have the GPS and that's where it tells them to go? Or do they know the layout so well?
I'm for if it's an Amazon driver, I'm sure they've got a map or some kind of iPad somewhere or something on your phone.
Hey, I 100%
is landing you.
In London,
Amazon's technology stack must be amazing because there's never an issue there.
Never.
UPS.
No.
Never
issues all day long.
In London,
you have issues with UPS.
Ooh.
I still think they're writing them down on hand notes and giving them a piece of paper and say, "Here's the address. Drop it off here."
Oh, wow, we're gonna get ourselves in trouble here.
We will get ourselves.
That's all right.
All drivers are great. I'll side note this, and then we get to the meat of this. Only because you're gonna really appreciate this, and it's gonna be the most Tommy thing ever. After college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I wanted to find myself or whatever, or just kind of figure out something.
Sure.
And someone told me you can buy buses, like school buses, for incredibly cheap. Like when they're
going to go travel the world, aren't you?
But here's the kicker. Obviously, I had no money because but what apparently they said you could do is you can convert the ethanol, the gas fuelage to like peanut oil or
it's a diesel truck
or normal like food oil, basically vegetable oil.
You can go to McDonald's and say, "Hey, give me your old oil." They're like,
so what I was going to do was go to Chinese buffets around the nation. Because they have to pay for the oil for some.
They do.
So I will take your oil. Give me a meal. I will take your oil.
They're still paying then.
Well, I'm paying for Chinese. No. They're going to give me a meal, and I'm going to take their oil.
That's what I'm saying. They're still paying. They're now paying the cost of a meal.
No, that's not really like. It's not really. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, how much leftovers are there? So just give me your leftovers.
That's fine. Yeah, I didn't. Obviously, I didn't plan this out completely.
So when you. Are you gonna try hitting them right as they're closing all the time? Was that the plan?
Well, yeah. So
are we reading too much into this?
No. It was gonna be. Yeah, it was always gonna be at night when they're about to close. Go. Don't worry. Don't go there. I'll take it for you as a good Samaritan.
I can
Yeah.
I can take all your leftovers.
Could you imagine though converting a bus and living in that? That was a dream. That was the dream.
That was your dream?
Not gonna lie,
I've seen some renovations of like vans and buses that
pretty amazing.
folks have
Yeah.
done online. Yeah, it's crazy.
It would be a slightly annoying because I believe, I mean, for Tommy, I think you and I would be fine because we're short enough that we could walk down the aisle of the bus without hitting our head on things, which I think would be fine. But I'm not gonna lie though, I definitely did find when I was a kid growing up, I found a Dunkin' Donuts that would throw away donuts at the end of the night, and I knew to go in 5 minutes before the end and be like, "I'll have a dozen donuts, and any other ones that you want to throw away, I'll take those too." And I'd come home with like 3 dozen donuts
Would they
for the
really?
price of one. Oh, they just give them to me. They're like, "We're gonna throw them out anyways." I'm like, "I'll eat them anyways."
Great
Like,
minds
no
think
problem.
alike.
And that's
No problem.
see,
It's
great
Italian.
minds
you're
think alike.
extending that good gesture, right? We're like, I'd like a dozen donuts. So you're gonna pay for a dozen,
Hmm?
right? So that I think that like curbs the threshold of like, hey,
Yes.
do you have any free
Oh.
donuts you want to give away?
Yeah, you don't just walk in and be like, "Hey,
oh, yeah.
Where's your
hey, I'll take
donuts?
your trash out for you
I
today."
know. Yeah,
That's what I
Right.
was doing basically.
here's the trash bag.
Yes, exactly. Anyways, all that wrapped up. Let's get into today's topic. Good topics for discussion. It's funny. I'll say this as we get going here. It's funny when you are a data person and you look at the world and you see data everywhere, and you're like, "Oh, that's a cell phone interacting with a register. Cash register. There's got to be data being generated. Where's that data going? There's you're checking out at the store and they're checking scanning every item. Yeah, I know that thing's creating data somewhere. I wonder where that's going. Wonder what they're doing with that." And as I've interacted with a lot of companies, odds are there's a lot of data being generated, but it's probably not being utilized
Useless.
very well. And it's just sitting there or getting collected or even just being generated and staying around for a little bit of time and then disappearing. There's missed opportunities with that data. Anyways, I just see that all over the place. I feel it's the there was a movie that I see data, and it's not really I see data.
People.
Yeah, what movie is that from?
Sixth Sense.
The Sixth Sense. Yeah, I have the seventh sense that comes from data. Yeah, I see.
I
data.
honestly think there's a link that I completely agree because that's what happened. I'm literally walking back on my walk with my daughter from the bus. I'm like, well, why would it be 15 minutes late? Is it when they left? Is it they have to have some tracking? Do they get a penalty for that? And do they have a rate? The same way Jerry Seinfeld says he always does thinking jokes and like he
You
sees
always
the
think in
world
data.
and I think we're always thinking that why are you inputting that? Are you even doing anything with that?
Like a
Shouldn't you
curse
do
now.
something? How cool would it be if you did something with that?
It's like a
That's our
curse.
lives. Yeah,
You always think in data now. You're stuck with it.
it's a beautiful thing.
Some may say yes, some may say no. Speaking of data, this is actually going to be very well and open us up right to our topic very well here. So the topic for today is 365 Data Science. Is talking about career advice, different types of data science roles explained. So this whole data, this is their perspective on where they see data science. And I would argue there's a lot of language in here that's not just data science. It's data science and a lot of other data roles that go along with data activities. Let's call it that. So the article link will be in the description of the video. So if you want to follow the link, go ahead and hit the description of this video. That's where the link will be. I think it'd be probably best just to kind of maybe rattle through all the names of the different data people and give maybe a brief definition based on what the article says. And then we could discuss what I'm interested in seeing is these are the roles that people are identifying around data. Where do these roles fit inside Fabric? Which of these roles do we think would come into this Fabric ecosystem at this point? So we'll go through the list. First on the list here is a data strategist, a data architect, a data engineer, a data analyst, the business intelligence analyst, the data scientist, the machine learning or the ML ops engineer, the data product manager, and that's kind of those are the main key areas here. Let me start with anything stand out to you guys initially? Anything we're going to start things off on here?
I think
Go ahead, Tommy.
there's two main kind of things that stuck out in terms of one, the first data strategist, and then two, the need for this in our world. And we've talked about this in spades, where if you were to say, hey, I need a Power BI person, well, there's not really levels to that. We have the only thing, and we always refer to it, is SES skill matrix, but that's not necessarily unfortunately not yet a universally adopted approach towards hiring. And when we think about what type of person do I need, I think we need to get more and more granular on the types of roles that we're looking for and those skill levels.
Okay. I think at first glance, one of the things I'm seeing in here is like it's interesting to me because I think I have obviously a perception on the data ecosystem, and all of the parts of that data ecosystem work together, right? The different roles. I think within here, over time, I've seen a role of a BI developer. And this spans like multiple different roles within here, right? Because I know my team actually like falls directly into that, where we're playing a lot of data engineering roles. We're playing the analyst role, regardless of whether that's data or business intelligence analyst. And like there's the report author, like the building, sharing reports, etc. So I think those roles right off the top, I think are missing. And then two, it introduces a different thought I don't think I'd had before around like, oh, okay, so from a data science perspective, is this how they view the world, right? Like there are, it's very data science specific: data strategy, data architect, data engineering, analyst, data scientist, engineer, manager. Like there's a lot of independent, disparate roles that I technically don't know whether or not are always aligned within organizations, because I don't see a lot of these roles. So first thought. Second thought, this is overall a very structured, theoretical approach to business versus reality.
Yeah.
And that's not a criticism, but if I look back at the author, Alexandra, it rings true, because there's a lot of education behind there and a lot of writing, etc. Where this falls apart, I think, in my mind, with reality, is businesses are in the business of getting it done, not in the mode of getting it right. So there's no such thing as, I have never seen such thing as a data strategist or a data architect that start with the idea without engaging with the business. It's always a business driven initiative. Right. And long ago, I think we got ourselves in these situations where the technologies were not fast enough. So you would find yourself in realms where you had technical people going off and building a data thing and coming back to the business, and the business going, okay, like it's 25% useful, but you need to go build this 75% now. And they're like, okay, well, that's going to take 2 more years. Right? Like, because we built this thing and we apparently built it wrong. And I think things have evolved into a little bit of those different roles where I'm at, where I would say I'd also throw in, you have data analysts, but those would be your business people, right? Like we're introducing more business people into this mix because of the reporting tools that allow them to do a lot of this stuff, namely Power BI. So I think that's the other part I'd like to introduce into this. I think conversation is like there's a shift here too, because it's not just a well-planned approach that you go execute with all these roles behind the scenes. There's a lot of people and a lot of process to go along with, the technologies that you build.
Would you agree or disagree that there's a bit of a blend happening too, where I read the business intelligence analyst and data analyst explanation in the article, where they're pretty straightforward, clean, analyze, visualize data reporting, where I would foresee, or I even foresee it now, that those can't survive as individual roles or sole roles by themselves anymore. Where I am more of the opinion where if you're going to be a BI analyst or data analyst, you also have to adopt the engineering or the architect role probably more to a primary part now to just be full time.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I think a data analyst needs to be able to understand how to use reporting tools, but they're like depending on it depends on the business.
Sure.
I'll put that first. In larger organizations, you could absolutely be a data analyst, bar none, just doing data analysis. Like there is a ton of data out there, and it takes a long time to pull insights or look for trends or things within the business by ripping through the same data sets, right? So you don't need heavy report building skills like you would with a business intelligence analyst. If you're going to add in the tech stack part of it, I think you are a stronger data analyst, but at the same time, those are role salary differences as well.
Yeah.
Right? Like a data analyst is here, we're going to provide you everything you need here, and you can rip this apart as best you can in Excel, in Power BI, in these tools that we're going to tee up for you. Whereas when you add the engineering skills and the technical skills on top of that, where you're building the reports, I think you're elevating your skill set. You're also elevating your position. So like, I don't think those are the same. I think it is a graduation, or that you would require it. But at the same time, like smaller companies may, because they're not going to have positions that are open for like just a data analyst. They would need you to fill multiple positions, and that's where I would say, like, well, then that's a negotiated upswing because both of those skills.
I would agree. Mike? I agree with you on this one, and I'm trying to. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take these different roles, the description of these roles. One of the roles that I've not ever really talked about or really put a lot of thought into is the data strategist.
Yeah.
So this is a role they're kind of putting here, and it's kind of talking about they're there to make data-driven decisions, to help them produce products and services. They use these people to help improve their existing processes, right? So that's one of the roles that I'm not sure I quite resonate with. I'm not sure where that sits. I would actually probably put the strategist and the architect together at the same level of rolling. However, when I sit back and look at these different roles, I'm trying to think about, okay, if we think about our company, we have 3 things we're trying to affect or provide change to. Our people in our company, the data culture, the process on how we do things, and the technology. Those are our 3 levers we can pull. And I'm looking at these different roles, and I feel like many of these roles are falling into one of those categories, right? The strategist and the architect are focusing more on the process and potentially investing in the people as a part of your organization. The engineer, the analyst, the business analyst, even maybe the data scientist is focusing more on the technology side of things. And the ML ops engineer.
Yeah, before you jump though, like the strategist is doing one other key part here.
Sure.
Which is trying to create new revenue streams, right? And I think it's interesting that like the name data strategist is something I haven't come across. Like I would almost, I also live in a realm where we're doing multiple different types of reporting and business intelligence.
Yes.
But I think that the main driver in this thought is, well, this is the one role that would be figuring out what would make the company money, right?
And to me, this is the executive sponsor, right? So if I'm looking at that in the company,
well,
ish.
So I'll say that the data strategist resonated with me wholly, and maybe because
have you heard of it before?
I've not heard of the exact role, but the exact paragraph resonates true. Not because I seen it at a company, but the book that I quote all the time, and I had the opportunity to actually interview the author of How to Measure Anything. His entire livelihood for the last 50 years has been basically that data strategist is basically going in and understanding what are people trying to measure and how to measure it. There's a whole, and I don't want to say industry for that, but there's a wide gap, I think, in the need for that data strategist for what are we measuring? Like what's really important? No, not what you've been measuring for 50 years, but what's the goals and how can we actually then effectively, even to a 90% confidence, get to a point that we're moving in the right direction? He's worked with the government. He's worked with companies in terms of like IT security to say like, hey, how do we know our IT is secure based on our company structure? And well, that might not be a role. I resonate with this because that's honestly what I've tried to take that hat on a lot of projects of the data
Yeah.
strategists, where they say, oh, we want you to do this, this visuals, or we're going to look at that. It's like, well, how does that relate towards, your goals? They're like, that's just what the companies want. And that conversation we went into on, well, where's that threshold? We've talked about those pain points. There's a need for that. I just don't think that's really been explored a lot. I think it probably exists more in firms, agencies, rather than internally.
Well,
I was gonna say, I think this varies varies widely across companies, and I think
I would agree with that statement.
yes, I think us as consultants coming into companies, there's a reason why we're showing up. We're acting as that data strategist to some level because they're basically the company is basically saying to some level, hey, look, there's this new thing called Power BI. It's on this new kid on the block called Power BI, right? It's helping us do some good things, but we need some planning, we need some organization, we need some direction to figure out where we're going. And I think in some levels, again, this is probably varies very differently between companies, but you're right. There does need to be an alignment on what do we think is valuable as a company? Where are we going as a company? And in this data strategist, it's basically saying, hire someone to show up and say, what data should you collect? That way you could use the data to add products and services and add value to people, which I think all of us will agree at the end of the day that the data is probably more important than the product. It's in some cases. Like if you have a product and you have more data than your competitors, right? Anyone can build your product. But if you have more data than them and you can act more intelligently on top of that data inside that product, that's why people will use you. That's why people would buy you, essentially.
So there's two things that come to mind. I agree with Mike. If, in quotes, a company has a strategy, then I think those 3 bullet points from the strategist are things that are talked about. Absolutely.
Correct.
Like defining metrics, Tommy, to your point. I think this is where the business intelligence conversation is. It's about creating value for the business. It's about understanding the metrics. It's about making sure that the data is accurate and clean, etc. I think the reason you're seeing in some cases, and I don't know what the ratio is, of companies that don't have those conversations are because there's a deficiency between the parts of the organization where there's a mentality of just getting stuff done, get it done, get it done, and there's no strategy. There's no overall strategy of looking across all those organizational units and seeing where the value is that could be sussed out to maximize internal processes, remove a lot of the barriers, automate things, etc. But most of the focus for business intelligence is driving towards efficiencies, right? Getting better insights to run the business better. And that's a hard metric for data leaders to make sure that they communicate the value to the business all the time. Because if you even look at this article, this is saying you need 2, 4, 6, 8, 8 or 9 people just to get things running. And that's why I'm saying no, you don't. That's not how business is run.
No.
But the reason I leaned into that one point in the strategist where it's they could create a new revenue stream via data monetization. And I think that is something that I don't see a lot of, right?
Yeah.
In some companies, you're not going to. You need reporting, you need business intelligence. Every company, I would argue, should invest time in some form of business intelligence where you are maximizing the use of your data, where you're able to make decisions based on it, because it's going to set you apart from your competitors and it's going to let you understand how well your business is doing. Where I think it's unique is if you're able to also leverage then the data artifacts that you've built and created in a fashion that's a saleable thing and you're making money off of it somehow, that's where I see the value of the strategist come in, as opposed to being something I think is a byproduct of many people as
Yeah.
that are combined having the conversation.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll be is just, I really do think this is the most undervalued or under realized at organizations, because that role could be summed as, are we measuring the right things and are we measuring them the right way? And that's a constant reevaluation by an organization. That's not something that's every 10 years. I think it's constantly evolving what those metrics and what they're trying to measure are, and the new data coming in and how they're measuring it. I really think that, because everything else flows from here, the architect, the engineer, all of that should be kind of based right on what you're measuring.
And I'd also argue here too, you also have to look at your competitive landscape. I think about some data stories that I hear from very large companies, right? I mean, on one hand, you look at the cost to acquire the data in some industries is very expensive, right? So if I'm thinking like the auto industry, every car that comes with the Sirius XM radio does radio for Sirius stuff. But I think much of its profit actually comes from the idea that every vehicle that's connected can send its data to, Mother Ford or, Mother GM or what. And you look at now at what Tesla's doing too. Same thing, right? Their car is literally an iPhone driving on wheels. So you're getting over-the-air updates. It's sending data back and forth. They're improving your product just with the data alone. And so I will also say, when you think about the cost to acquire that data, depending on your company's value or proposition to say what is data that is important to us and how can we use that in our product build, you find more data is being sent from things that are more expensive, right? Or in the web space, right? A website is very easy to collect data from because it's so lightweight and so it doesn't cost a lot. So there's different costs to acquire the data. So I think the strategist comes in here and basically says, okay, let's think about what we need to do to make good decisions within our company and how hard is it for us to acquire that information. Where I find there are some challenges around that data is when we start looking at like manufacturing or things that are like we're producing products, but we're not necessarily connecting the idea of what are we doing either in our manufacturing process or what are those products doing so that they produce value of the data. And so I don't know. I think it's going to vary widely between organizations. But when I've seen this occur, I think there's a consideration for here is, well, how much is it going to cost us to get the information? Because at some point you say it's too expensive to get the data and we just don't collect it. And you figure out other ways of doing your analysis.
Question for you too. How often do you hear in your day-to-day or strategy meetings, well, we can't measure that, or that's unmeasurable? Does that ever come up at all?
I think the opposite occurs. I think there's always things people want to measure, but how would we get the data to support that? I think that there's concepts around like, we know we need to get to this level of measurement. It'd be really nice if we can measure this, but then, we dig into it and the data that's coming through is not clean. We don't have the right amount of information. We can get like half of that way the answer, but not all the way because we need to, add some extra data to it or what, like there was no, to your point, Tommy, there was no plan when the data was being generated. It just started getting generated. And now we're looking back at it and going, oh, it would have been nice if we had some kind of categorization, or it would have been nice if we added a customer ID to something, or it would have been nice if we had tied this thing to something else we have data about. So there's like this whole and I think this is part of where you incorporate like the analyst. You start talking about like the data scientist. Like you start figuring out, okay, how do we apply effort to the data so the data becomes more valuable?
And this does dovetail. I mean, I think I hung this up as we were trying to get through describing each of the roles, but the strategist, like to some degree, I think we may be taking that, or not thinking about that role a lot because we're the people thinking about it, I guess, and we come in and like
I'd agree
to the point in the article, like a lot of companies hire this out.
Yep.
But it is 100% those conversations with business in many regards, Mike. Like, yes, they built things in this way to just service something without the thought that, oh, I might need to roll this up by, or this might need to integrate with this system, or And then, yes, it takes a bunch of time to, clean that up. Data analysts, right? Like rip through everything, understand how both like systems work together. What are the things that are missing that are needed? Like
Yep.
there's core data issues from the source systems that I think business intelligence people run into all the time.
Let me give you a real world example of that one right now. The APIs that collect the activity logs for Power BI is a prime example of this, because it's a single API that returns data from many different teams, right? That we have the Fabric team, we have the Synapse team, we have like all these different teams that are making data in now PowerBI.com. The data is coming back to us in very weird ways. There's duplicated columns that mean the same thing, but they're different names.
Are you
right?
Are you becoming the data analyst for Microsoft right now?
No, I'm literally going through their. Well, I
I'm
have
trying not to rip my
You're
hair
gonna
out.
go, you are because you're gonna go, hey Microsoft, you're dumb here and here and here, and fix this and do that.
I'll see that message coming. Yeah.
there's a whole bunch, but
this
I mean,
team's not doing this.
I get
But
a
it
lot
makes
of my
sense.
Carlo notifications.
It
I mean,
does.
I go look at like a Power BI workspace and like the Power BI data set, and it has its sets of
100%.
columns, and then you go find, okay, let's go find a different activity that's related to something that's like Fabric related, and now there's new columns, and there's potentially columns that have in the Fabric elements, right? I'm looking at it going, well, that's like like I'm literally, and that you can't get to this point until you actually start combing
Extraction,
all of the
yeah.
data.
Speaking from experience, migrating
man.
multiple different ways to do something into a singular way is not so easy.
Not so easy. Yes. So,
And
but this is, I mean, that is like a real world example. Like we know we need to track it. We know we need to capture data on things, but there's not like a standard, a bucket, a way we're saying there's not a common thought of at the top level. Again, it's the idea of like, this is the quintessential problem, right? We need to get something out the door so users can start using it. Well, we know we need tracking, so just add some metrics. Okay, we do that. And then we come back to it after the fact and say, wait a minute, none of this stuff's matching up. Like we've got a lot of data coming in, but we've got so much that data comes in a very unclean format. And so now we need to build a strategy around how are we going to shape that data so that it makes sense. And the only reason I can see all this now is because I'm building tools that will get all the data and let me query the data as a SQL table. So I can go in and find, okay, what kind of activity event is this? Where did this come from? What data is this user making? What's happening here? So as we're interacting with the actual Power BI.com environment, I can get real metrics about what's happening and what's occurring there. So that's something that's just very fresh in my mind.
Well, and it goes back to you're just collecting the data, but then it's trying to understand too, what are those key items that you're trying to focus on? I just had this conversation last week. I was like, well, okay, well, how many reports do you have? We don't know. Well, what are the top reports out there? We don't know. Okay, we need to get that. We need to start there. Like you have this very large extraction of data, which you said is not in a really cleaned format.
Yes.
And not only this is not just the REST PI. This is a lot of things we deal with. Not only does it not really tell you that where we need to hyper focus or where do we want to lean, but at the same point, it's like, okay, how are we going to measure this? And then again, talking to like we can't actually just proceed until we have this, until we know where we stand. And that's a big part where usually it's always the other way where it's like, here's all the data, here's the things we're going to be doing.
Figure out where you find value from it.
Right. Rather than going, what are you trying to measure? Where's the value? Now we're going to actually create the process.
Correct.
The data is nothing more than people process technology in a nutshell.
Yes. Yeah.
What's interesting about this strategy conversation is, Mike, this brings to mind something you said in a previous episode where we were talking, you had mentioned technology seems to be moving faster than businesses could react.
Yes, I agree with that.
And I think we're in this world because the new reporting tool, Power BI, is the tool that has allowed many more users to engage in understanding and getting visibility across systems where data from those systems is hugely important to them because for whatever the reasons, right? Whether it's in Excel documents, whether those systems don't talk to each other and they're not integrated, whether there's no warehouse, like even if you have a centralized repository of data, there's always stuff on the peripheral, right?
Yeah.
That's going to have some sort of phased approach of getting into the main system, but isn't going to be there yet because the business continues to move at the speed of business.
Yes.
So
and the business, to that point, let me just, I agree with you. And in addition to this, the business is continually buying other third-party tools that have not been integrated with everything else.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying, like, the business moves at the speed of business.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, if they need to solve something, they're going to go solve it, and it's a lot of the times it's with a third-party tool.
And less consideration given to the data portion of it.
Or a lot of times they're their own business unit. They can make their own decisions, and they don't talk to technology. They don't talk to data people.
Good point.
Yep.
Right. So you don't get in the way of them. You adapt to the way the business wants to operate. And what that forces continually, and you think about our conversations a lot, is reworking large systems that interact, or reworking how we collect data from those systems to make sense of it, make sense of it to the business. So in reality, to me, as I'm like thinking through the strategy component of it, like there's a big breakdown between business and the technology parts, because they're building technologies into the business without thinking that they're building technology into the business. They're creating problems for the business because there's no, if you don't have a structure around these units getting together and making choices around the types of tooling that they bring into the systems, they may be creating more of a problem for the business than solving their little thing. So it should be part of the same conversation. So maybe I'm wrapping myself around the axle where there should be a data strategist in all organizations, but we just probably call it something else.
So I would agree with you. I think a data strategist helps the conversation. I think it also provides more direction for the business in general. I think my argument here is that executive sponsor either should be hiring out that skill or should be taking on the role of the data strategist to some level, because I think the strategy informs a lot of everything else inside this team, right? The strategy informs how many architects you need. The strategy informs where the data engineering is doing, what tools you're using.
Because those are things that cost money.
Yeah, right? That's where I'm going with this.
And correct. The business and the strategy, you can have a strategy, but if the strategy and the roadmap is a 5-year plan, right? That's going to look different from an organizational structure as opposed to the strategy and the plan needing to be condensed into 1 year. Correct. And then you have all those, like, we need a rapid build. And then once we build all this stuff, we need to maintain and fine tune and continue to grow. Like those are 2 different conversations.
You're forgetting the other side of the coin there, Mike. Let me lean on to what you just said.
Am I forgetting the coin, or do I have the whole coin? Or maybe I have $1 and you're looking at coins. I don't know.
Or maybe I have some euro kind of thing. You're not. I don't know.
Maybe I'm
not even on the right currency.
Maybe we're way too far into the weeds on this.
Hey, maybe I'm using crypto and you're still using dollars. I don't even know.
I haven't had cash in my wallet for 10 years. So, digitized.
It's funny you say that, Tommy, because I just saw a YouTube short of someone going into Burger King. And they're like, people are buying burgers on credit. And they were like, it's a news article. Like, no one's going to use these credit cardy things inside our, actually, it was, anyways, it was funny. It was just like this whole cash versus credit thing. Anyways, sorry, go ahead, Tommy.
Had to be there, I'm sure. So, but
yes, very much so.
Okay, we'll frame it back. We talked about the data strategist going through and understanding where the architect, the engineer. But from our conversation, if we're framing this data strategist the way we have been, where they're also responsible for the measurements and what we're measuring in that other side of the coin, that's going to then dictate downstream the policies and the process and the people at the company, right? Because if they're shifting or responsible for what the company's going to try to measure, what the company's going to try to achieve, that's going to then go downstream to who's your marketing team, what technologies that marketing team have, and also who those people are. So they're affecting the culture. They have to have that authority too, where if they're going to be successful.
And I think this definitely, and this is why to me the strategy is typically a team approach or it's part of the adoption roadmap or a data culture roadmap where, to Mike's
Mm-hmm.
point, you have an executive sponsor that at least understands that this isn't important, right? Like the byproduct of not having these things is very apparent in organizations that don't have them. They just
Yes.
may not know how to fix them. So yeah, like creating the the center of excellence, or community practice, or whatever you want to call it, the body of, hey, collectively we need to solve these problems, because collectively, to your point, Tommy, like it's an organizational thing ultimately, right? And it may be led by a team, like a business intelligence team, to create these artifacts and ways in which the organization can leverage tools, how they build things, to streamline, to make sure that everything is being built in a similar fashion so that they can be used and reused. I think is absolutely part of this conversation and how it spools up. To kind of take this on a different tack, though, what's interesting to me, and maybe I make this comment and you guys rip through, but this article is like the roles and responsibilities within an organization. But if you think about a greenfield, like a brand new data source, if you read through the responsibilities section, this almost reads like a roadmap in and of itself.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't read like it doesn't read like you need. If you would take out the names of, like, I have to have this person,
Yes.
this is the list of responsibilities that are shared across individual, like, people, whatever they are, that make a data solution work.
So I want to tag on that thought, and I think sometimes we talk in terms of roles as if they are a person, and I think
Yes.
you have to generalize this article a little bit and say, okay, there are 8 roles that are probably being performed within your organization. You need to prepare for these roles and think about,
Yeah.
okay, you have a team of 3 or 2 or 1. How do these roles overlay on top of your existing team? Right. And so this is where I'm going a lot with the Power BI skills matrix right now, where I'm very, if I take these roles and say, okay, there is a skills matrix, people who can consume reports, people who build reports, people who model data. There's this thing called a release manager and an admin. If you just focus on just the Power BI ecosystem, I think those are the main skill roles an organization needs to plan for. And they're just what I would call maybe personas, right? They're not necessarily a role tied to a single person. So you may have an architect who's acting in some way, a portion of the business analyst, a portion of the architect role, and a portion of the strategist all rolled into one person, right? They're doing a lot of the planning. And a lot of the communication I use when I talk to clients is we're building 2 bridges. And this, I think, makes sense a lot with this conversation. We're building one bridge from the data side. What data do I have? How do I shape it so it's ready for the report? And then on the other side, I'm talking a lot about the business requirements and trying to figure out what are the insights we care about, how many pages in the report, what does the user need to look at to do their job. And so as you build this bridge from both sides, you have a lot of technical IT space, data analyst, data engineer, business intelligence analyst, trying to figure out, oh, actually, let me say that again, data engineering and maybe the data scientist or the ML ops engineer, right? There's a lot of engineering work happening at the same time. You're also trying to figure out, how do I take that engineering work and make sure that it makes sense to what the business wants on the other side? And you join the bridge in the middle with, I now have a cube that is built with measures that I understand, with a model of my data that I can then build reports on top of.
And shoot, Mike, I'm seeing this more and more too, where this is not even their full-time job. These roles, where this is maybe from the
Right.
department.
And that's where I was just like, theoretical versus reality, right? Because
Yeah.
if this is viewed under the lens that each of these is individual positions, it's a non-starter.
Yeah.
For like smaller and mid-sized companies as they grow. But if we're looking at it as far as like roles and responsibilities, then yes, there are people in the organization that are doing multiple different things that are outlined in this article.
Yeah,
That's
not
true.
even from a data point of view. I'm seeing more personally in some of the projects where these people, their primary role is not in data. They're either operations or they're in other roles, but they're taking on more where they would relate to this ETL and the strategy point of view, but they're not necessarily by title a business analyst.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
the-
I mean,
I'm seeing more of it.
Yes, within their business unit, they're understanding how they need to shape some data and like model it a little bit. But I think the way I think about this would be much larger organizational efforts, not necessarily the
Sure.
business unit. I think the problem is more well understood because
Mhm.
more people have a concept that there's more to engineering and putting together data sets than for their reports than they ever have been before. But I wouldn't put them in the bucket of, oh, they understand like data engineering
No,
and how to do
no,
things.
I agree with that. I've been putting more of the permissions in these roles, trying to bucket it where what are you allowed to do and what are you expected to do, rather than a title. From when we're thinking about permissions in these roles, I've kind of been breaking it into those kind of two areas, and that kind of dictates what that person is.
Yeah.
I like the expectation side of thing. I think that's a good way of using that to be able to define the expectations are this, and this. And I think even in these different categories that are broken out here, there are probably varying degrees of sophistication in each of those levels. Like, are you a data engineer level 100? Are you a level 300? Are you level 500? Like, what kind of data engineer are you? And I think that also informs where you're at. So, go ahead. I was gonna wrap it up here for final thoughts. So, any final thoughts? We probably want to get closer here on finishing on time here, so we're on time on this one. Any final thoughts as we go through this list of, I guess, roles around data engineering?
Yeah, I guess the final new thought would be this was a much more thought-provoking article than I thought it would be as far as it relates to a lot of different roles and responsibilities. So awesome. I think it's also a good litmus for how you would build out a team based on the responsibilities of all of these different tasks. Because if you think about it, if a business thinks about these roles as all of them need to be in place, and they do, right? We're doing all of these things. I don't think there's any argument there. I think where you want to focus your time and money from a business perspective would drive deeper into, do you need a specific role over another one, right? Depending on where you're at in your data journey, you may have a team or a couple people that are doing a lot of these tasks. But if you want to ramp up per se and like, hey, you need to connect to a bunch of systems and you need to do a bunch of different things. Okay, well, now you're looking at specific data engineers. Okay, we already have our data. We've got the team that's well done. We don't have a ton of different independent systems. We want to start doing predictive analysis, et cetera. Like, well, you need a specific data scientist, right? That you can leverage as an analyst. So I think it's also interesting for me that you could also look at this, as kind of a litmus of like, hey, across this blended roles and responsibilities that I have within my ecosystem, if I'm going to stress a particular area, that means I'm going to go look for this individual.
Yes.
Yeah. My final thought, I think this is confirming something that I've been seeing. And then this conversation is just kind of a stamp on it, where if you're seeing stopgaps, barriers in your analytics at your organization, I think it really is coming to strategy. Well, what are you trying to achieve as an organization? What are you trying to measure? How do you measure it? Do you understand a clear path for each of those questions on terms of what are you measuring and how are you measuring it? Everything from here then flows downstream to what data are we collecting, to your point, Mike, to how are we extracting it, then how are we going to highlight it?
Yes. So what I will say is, I think there's a unique opportunity for a lot of people who understand. If you understand app development and you understand data development, you're a very valuable person, because a lot of people build applications and things without technically minding how should the data be stored and collected and reported on later on. So I think that's a valuable type person. As we go back here and look at the roles here, I think I would say, don't be scared if you don't have all of these roles in your organization right now. I think this is a good place to look forward to. And I'd probably echo or think through more of, I think many companies try to measure too much. And if they simplified what they measured, if they simplified their definition of success, what does that look like to a consumer, a customer, whatever that is? If you think about, focus on the customer, What do they need? How can I better serve them? And if you focus on that side of things, you now have the right kind of KPIs to bring forward to then generate or build the right tool, program, app, whatever that thing is. So I think I'm very hyper focused on listening to what the customer needs and trying to anticipate how can I make their life easier with our data and or our strategy. Anyways, that's my thoughts. With this, thank you very much for listening to our episode. We appreciate your time. I hope you found this one valuable. Hope there were a couple nuggets here you pulled out of this one. Our only ask, if you like this episode, or if you like what you were hearing here, please share it with somebody else, either on social media or in your company. If you're having conversations with people, we'd love for you to just let people know that you're finding value in the podcast. With that, where else can you find the podcast, Tommy?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe, leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. If you have a question, an idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about on a future episode, head over to the Power BI powerbi.tips/podcast.
There we go.
Join us live every Tuesday, Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Join the conversation on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Beep, beep, beep. We should probably record that so that you don't have to do it every single time.
It's actually great.
We literally make you write it every single time.
It's way more entertaining when it's
way more entertaining. It's always different every time. Anyways, thank you all very much. We appreciate your time. Have a great week.